Today I will show you how to bleed your brakes quickly and easily with our bleeding kit on a SRAM guide with bleeding edge technology. You will be dealing with brake fluid. It is relatively aggressive. Therefore we recommend that you wear gloves and protective goggles. Let's first look at the scope of delivery. We have 5.1 brake fluid. We have 2 syringes with associated hoses and clips. We have a bleed block to hold back the pistons. We have a Torx tool, a T25 on the T10 on the other side. A brass nozzle for the connection to the brake lever, and a nozzle for your bleeding edge opening on the brake caliper, as well as a paper manual. First, get ready with the syringes by pushing the nozzles into the hoses. Slide the clamps over the hoses, and then put the hoses on the syringes. Next, fill the syringe for the brake caliper with 20 milliliters, which we draw up slowly. Draw the liquid from the hose into the syringe. Hold the syringe with the opening upwards, and press the air out of the hose in the syringe. We also recommend degassing the liquid by closing the red clamp on the tube, and creating a slight vacuum by pulling the syringe plunger. You can see directly how air is released from the liquid. Of course, we also squeeze the air out of the syringe and repeat the process for the second syringe, but only with 5 milliliters of the brake fluid. Then we prepare the brake caliper. To do this, we remove the pads so that no dot gets on them by removing the safety clip. Loosen the pad fixing screws with a hexagon socket spanner, and then we can pull the pads out to the rear. To bleed the pistons, they have to be pressed into the saddle one by one. Please do this with a plastic or wooden object, and not with anything sharp-edged made of metal. Tire levers, for example, are suitable. And once you have done this, you can insert ours with bleed block, and lock it with the pad fixing screws so that the pistons remain in position. Push them crosswise for 4 piston brakes, and lengthwise between the pistons for 2 piston brakes. When bleeding, the brake lever should be approximately 75 to 80 millimeters away from the handlebar grip so that the channel opens cleanly. Now we put the lever in a position where the bleed screw is the highest point in the system, and turn the pad contact screw as far as possible against the direction of the arrow so that the reservoir has the maximum volume. At this point, a short note. We have mounted the syringe completely because we want to change the brake fluid completely. This should be done with brake fluid every 2 years at the latest, as brake fluid is hygroscopic, i.e., it attracts water. And in this context the volume increases and the boiling point of your brake fluid decreases. Now we can attach the syringe to the brake caliper by removing the bleed plug and opening the valve with a 4 mm hexagon socket. Then we close the valve again very easily and insert the nozzle until you feel it click into place. The valve then opens with 1 to a maximum of 2 counterclockwise turns. Then we go back to the lever. There we remove the screw plug with the Torx T10 spanner provided. And then screw in the syringe with the golden brass nozzle. Then we come to the bleeding itself. To do this, of course, we first open the clamps, then hold the syringes upright, and slowly squeeze brake fluid from the lower syringe into the upper syringe. We do not empty the lower syringe completely, but only to the extent that there is still about 5 milliliters in the syringe, so that we do not force air back into the system. If the brake fluid is no longer clear or has not been changed within the last 2 years, please close the upper clamp, unscrew the syringe, dispose of the fluid properly, refill it, degauss it, and screw it back onto the brake lever. Now we do the whole thing the other way round and press the upper syringe only slightly, while gently pulling the lower syringe so that a slight vacuum draws the fluid from the upper into the lower syringe. To be on the safe side, we then bleed the brake caliper again, for which we disconnect the brake lever. which we do by simply pulling it to the handlebar and fixing it with a cable tie. The bleeding is then done by alternating suction and pressure phases, i.e., by alternately pulling and pushing on the syringe, whereby the negative pressure in the suction phases pulls the last air bubbles out of the brake caliper. We now have to bleed the brake lever. This is done in a similar way to the brake caliper. I like to start by snapping the levers a bit to release the air, and then we start again with the suction phase and the pressure phase. Suction phase and pressure. Suction phase, negative pressure, and end with a pressure phase. Then remove the nozzle. Brake fluid must come up to the edge, that's right. Then we close the lever again, and then it's just a matter of dismantling. You can clean the brake caliper with a little water. Of course, you have to remove the bleed block. And then you can reinstall the pads and fix them in place. Make sure that you do not have any dot on your gloves. Basically, you can take the gloves off at this point. We also quickly clean the lever with water. Then we do a short function test by pulling the lever 3 times. Adjust the angle as we would like it. The lever width as well. And while we are at it, we also adjust the pad contact point while pulling the lever. Now you should have a proper pressure point again, and the bleeding is complete. You've seen that with the right tools it's not that difficult, and all I can do is wish you lots of fun on the trails.